Hi, thanks for joining us today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Adam Asnes with the latest of our monthly webinars. Most of you, I think, have joined, but if you haven't, we do this every month. And one of the ingredients that's really important in this webinar is the Q&A interface. Now, this is being co-broadcast both via Zoom and LinkedIn Live, and someone else is monitoring the LinkedIn Live questions for me. But if you would, just before we get started, in the Zoom interface, there's both chat and Q&A. I would really prefer questions go into the Q&A, and that way I have only one place to look for questions and all that. With that, let me just get started. My name is Adam Asnes, CEO, founder of Lingoport. We are a company that's very focused on translation for software and the actual automation around that. So it's we're not a translation agency. We're really a software company, and we make the difficulties of software translation kind of go away. We really automate all of that with a whole bunch of checks and uh, workflow that can be both AI and human centric, starts right from design in Figma up through product development. So, um, with that, I'll talk a little bit about Dave Ruane, and I realized I forgot to go back to the first screen on this presentation. This is the title screen I was supposed to be using. But with me, we have Dave Ruane, and I know Dave for quite a number of years, starting when he was the partner manager at XTM. But these days, he's with Lion People, focusing on everything from consulting, staffing, and M&A. He's been in the industry and the technology side of the industry a while. You can read that, and he has a lot to say, and he sees a lot because I like to think of Dave as Mr. Pick. By pick, I mean Process Innovation Challenge. He's been running that a few years. That is, if you haven't been to LocWorld, that is the competition where people show off kind of the innovative things they've come up with at their companies, and that is kind of at the leading edge of what's going on in the industry. And of course, we have a lot going on in the industry, and pretty much everywhere we have tech, you have really amazing power at our fingertips that can be both used and abused. With LLMs, I don't like to use the word AI because technically machine translation is AI, right? But specifically, Gen AI platforms are doing things that you couldn't do before, and doing it very quickly and at low cost. So, with that, that's the subject that we're going to talk about. I am very much imploring you to ask questions. Do not wait till the end of the webinar to ask a question. Just put it as it comes up, put it in the Q&A interface. If we answer your question in the next slide or whatever, don't worry about it. And no question too naive. This is a place, if you think it's naive, probably half the people are wondering the same thing and afraid to type the question. So please do. All right. Dave, it's your turn to be under the spotlight. What caught your attention at LocWorld this year, and what does it tell us about where localization is going?
Thanks for the intro, Adam. Nice to be here, everybody. As Adam says, happy to answer any questions that you put in and keep this interactive. Um, and I think interactivity is a good theme that came out of LocWorld. Sometimes people try and look at these events as the lens with which to look at the industry through. And I think that's even more true in the last 5 events that I've been to. You start to really get a feel of what the industry is going through just by looking at that microcosm of the event itself. So what's going on? Well, too many things going on. When I spoke to many people and asked them for their feeling after the event, I got words like overwhelmed, optimistic at times, uh, changing. My neck is sore from all the conversations. All these kind of high energy sort of we're moving in a direction type feelings. Um, but obviously the art is how to distill everything from that. Now, I'll try and do a little bit of that, and I'll try and do it briefly. A big shift that I saw was that the industry has really stopped debating, certainly at that conference, whether to use AI and is now focused on, right, now we're using it, how do we govern and orchestrate it? Almost every discussion, whether it was networking discussions or content sessions, assumed AI was already some part of the workflow. So conversations moved from translation productivity conversations, for example, to things like governance, risk management, and how localization teams fit into an AI first world. So this kind of leveling up was very clear. And to a degree, some people will do that as marketing and PR, but you could see that it was happening deeply as well, with solutions and evidence that people could show. Several enterprise teams reported AI first workflows. So these would be end client teams, delivering content in seconds rather than hours. So many case studies on that, with localization increasingly acting as a sort of a governance layer rather than the production layer. Um, one of the things I really noticed, Adam, at this event, and I think we're going to see more of, was the specificity, if I could say the word, or the specificness, you choose which one is correct. I'm not a linguist, of client-led solutions on show. So people were finding a specific problem, having a specific solution created for it. And I felt that that was an indicator of how mature solutions are rather than just being at a concept or pilot level. So real sense of clients being able to, end clients and publishers being able to, and empowered to build AI solutions on their side and then solving very clear niche specific problems and needs. I
I will say, I'll add to that, like when you actually design software and build software that's used by the general users, it's it takes a little longer than somebody can, actually, hack something together or vibe code it or even, really build something internally that does a very narrow slice of a thing. Because when you build a product, you have to really think about all your corner cases and all that, because that will really, bog you down, and bite some customer badly. But if you can build a specific thing that does a specific thing the way your company does it, it comes out first. Of course, then you're limited by that thing. I mean, I've seen a lot like it's funny. Some of my favorite customers are customers who have built something by themselves because they run into some brick wall with it eventually. And I don't have to convince them about automation or something like that, but they run into some brick wall that as a product developer, you have to think about those brick walls really early on. People wonder about that, and it's really just very true. But that's just that's my own commentary, and I need to move on. All right.
Well, I think these tools have enabled sort of
Yes.
a democracy of
Hmm.
people being able to create stuff that
Right.
necessarily mightn't have been able to before. I saw a couple of clear examples from
Hmm.
the end client side. Maja Nebez is marketing program manager from
Hmm.
ServiceNow, and she presented a headache that she had whenever translation memory term changes had to happen. So if there was some
Hmm.
kind of mistake in a translation memory at
Hmm.
term level and maybe at segment level as well.
Hmm.
So that manual process to go ahead, go in there, get it fixed, get it
Hmm.
reviewed, and all that process cost her about 5 days at time.
Hmm.
So if it was one issue, let's say to 100 issues, somewhere in around 5 days with maybe a little bit extra for more issues. Um, and it cost her about $2,000. So she basically said, okay, I can solve this better. She created a cloud code module. Now she's not a programmer, which does
Hmm.
this and
Wow.
created a clean TMX for imports. So TMX, translation memory exchange file,
Hmm.
and it took 2 hours with no linguistic issues. So the human piece in the workflow, she still involves linguists, by the way,
Hmm.
becomes before approving term changes, they look in. And
Hmm.
then, uh, so any flags during the process are then checked. And then after approval, they're checked as well. So there's human touch points, but her whole process goes from 5 days to a couple of hours,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
all managed by an automated workflow. So when you see, and when people at the top of the supply chain see those potential benefits, they're going to take them.
Hmm.
Um, we saw another just clear example. Abby Frackenpole from Dario Health, another end client company, spoke about AI as her pre-translation gate. So she does AI analysis and source files, which creates much better packages for going into
hmm.
translation.
Hmm.
It reduces cognitive load with linguists, prep time from 5 hours to 10 minutes. So it's those kind of efficiencies that give them real time back that we're starting to see.
Hmm.
And both of those, by the way, were part of a new thing we put together last year called the Client Innovation Platform. So it's like the Process Innovation Challenge,
Hmm.
but
hmm.
for end client innovations, which I
Hmm.
co-hosted with Alessandra Benazzi. Um, and that's another trend I saw. There was more end clients at LocWorld than I've seen at previous events. Um, and in the past two LocWorlds, I've started to see that, but that was definitely in evidence in this one in Dublin. Um, yeah. And
That's cool.
otherwise,
Hmm.
great event. Nimsy have taken over LocWorld in May. Look like they're focused on having events that serve everybody, or at least that's what Renato says.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah,
I'm quite excited about that. Actually. All right, we need to move on here. One of the things. Let's go. Okay. One of the things I want to get early on, and this is audience participation. By the way, I haven't looked at the question yet, but somebody asked a question. We will take those questions at the end. Ooh, and this is a good question, but this is a good general question to go to the end. So that's cool. All right, so uh, I'm asking a poll. This is audience participation, and the reason why I do that is that in my interactions with customers, I see people all over the spectrum. So there isn't really a wrong answer here. There's a lot of customers that I've dealt with that just they're underwater. I mean, they don't have the time to develop new systems and all that. And there's a lot of stuff that's in pilot right now. And there's obviously a big difference between a pilot and all that. So this poll is to do that. I'm talking too much. I should just launch the poll. Hold on a second, uh, because I haven't done this in a while. More. Uh, oh man, I'm just terrible here. I'm sorry to keep you waiting here
Need
because
help? I'll do that. I'll do that for
oh,
you.
that's Kate in the background. Thank you, Kate. You rescued me. All right. So the question is, how often are you using LLMs? I'll give like 15 seconds for people to answer. Please participate. That would be great. Um, so click how you're using them, and then we'll take that, we'll share that result. And I can't vote, in case you're wondering. All right. How are we doing on polling, Kate? Kate is in the background
I
running
think,
things.
yeah, I think we've done. So I will end it
Okay.
and share result.
All right.
You should
Here we
see it.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it all the time. Half. That's a pretty good number. It was actually higher than I expected. Partially deployed, a few of you experimenting, pilot phase, also a decent amount, and thinking about it. That's a pretty cool cross section. really looking forward to questions that come out of those various places. So again, no wrong answers here. All right, closing the poll. And we'll go on to our next slide. It just kind of lets us know where people stand. And we'll publish this in the newsletter and all that. All right, back to you, Dave. How have you seen teams use LLMs in localization workflows?
Yeah, I think from where I sit, some of the most advanced workflows use them as part of an orchestrated pipeline already, rather than a standalone translation tool per se, right? And the word is spreading fast via LinkedIn and events. And I think one of the things that has been very noticeable here is people have been experimenting a lot more with these technologies, almost like when the iPhone first came out and app-enabled other systems, Android and so on. Everyone got the latest app, was shown it to their friends in the bar, and everyone then installed that app, and it just went so quickly, right? So that kind of speed of, oh, what are you doing? Great, I'll use that. Boom. That's really happening. And look, I saw that a few weeks ago in LocWorld as well. Content flows through multiple AI steps, such as translation, terminology checking, brand checking, quality elevation, automated reviews, all that kind of stuff. And then humans step in when the system identifies risk or uncertainty. And that trend is really becoming a kind of, it's almost been preached and people are believing it, so it's self-fulfilling as well. But that kind of risk mitigation, I'm going to talk more about that again. Again, from LocWorld, an example, the company Miro described an AI-first pipeline handling between 2.5 and 3 million words per month, and they reduced turnaround times from 72 to hours, that is, 72 hours, wait for it, to roughly 1 to 2 seconds. Okay, so when you're dealing with that kind of scale of productivity enhancements, like it's evolution, it's not incremental. And then, you know, at the Process Innovation Challenge, we saw one of the innovators was from the vendor side, the technology vendor, and they were basically proposing that content can be automatically triaged by AI before it enters a workflow. So AI determines the risk, complexity, business intent, routes it where it needs to go. So fully automated AI plus human review, full human translation can fit into that. And then the workflow becomes content-driven rather than process-driven. That was, by the way, Sarah Basile at XTM, who actually won the Process Innovation Challenge this year.
All right, neat. You know, there's a lot of, you know, shift left is a term that the industry has really adopted for a few years now. There's a lot of emphasis on that too. I mean, I can think of years ago when clients were really psyched, really excited because they went from 3 months or 3 weeks, let's say, to 3 days, you know, with continuous automation and the like. Now we are talking seconds and immediate feedback. So that to me is very exciting. But there's a real potential threat here to the industry that is, you know, well understood. What happens to the translator's role longer term? I used to think it was bad for the translators just with MT, because now they're pushed into like a post editing of little segments, you know. But this is even more. Will they be okay being a final checkpoint after, let's say, an AI, another AI, judging the first AI's content, and then, you know, the humans looking at whatever got a poor score? You have a lot to say about this, I know. So I'm throwing that out for
you. The whole industry is going to go through leveling up phase. I really like the question that came in, by the way, which I'll address in a bit. But this leveling up will happen at all layers, and sometimes people will misconstrue it, but it's an opportunity to level up. And a misconception with disruptive technologies or systems is that automation replaces the experts. You can always use an innovation adoption bell curve, which I love to use to measure this. So at the moment, there's a group of linguists in the innovators group. So the left-hand side of that bell curve, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. So they've already been leveling up and they've been finding how they can apply their skills in new areas where they can get better value from what they're able to get through translation activity, let's say. And I would guess as an industry, we're well into the early adopters group on that bell curve, if not early majority. So where are they moving to? Well, in some cases, translators, linguist role is moving from a linguist to an advisor. So instead of humans translating every sentence, linguists can become language risk advisors, cultural experts, governance owners, in particular, language-related activities, reviewers of high-impact content. You could call it a kind of an in-country language risk advisor, I think is something that we're going to see a lot more. So they were responsible for judgment calls rather than production work. And judgment calls are where the really good stuff goes. Some of you may remember car factories back in the 80s, let's say, used to have skilled workers manually assembling every component, right? Every part assembled, an assembly line, you put the parts in. Now, it's complete robotics. So it's automated. Much of the assembly line is fully automated. They have percentages that they grade themselves with in terms of how much they've automated the assembly line. Best workers didn't disappear, though. They instead became production supervisors, quality specialists, process engineers, problem solvers when something, unusual happened. So humans stopped doing every weld and started deciding whether the weld quality was acceptable. So in the linguistic world, they stopped doing every segment and instead ensure the overall quality is right. And I think that's the mind shift change that many people talk about, but we're actually starting to see now. It's actually getting traction in real time.
Well, given that analogy, let me just question that. There are less auto workers. I should really check that. There are less auto workers now.
Yeah.
You have plants running with quite a bit less staff. So, I do think that, we shouldn't, there's talk that, with every leap in technology, you get more and more translation. So, more translation, so more quality checkers or more of those high leveled up opportunities. Well, there are more, but I can't say that every translator will find a role.
A large part of this will be pivoting. It will be
right.
Taking the skill set and then pivoting, upskilling, and moving into an adjacent area where their skills are actually valuable.
Right.
What happened to the map makers? What did they get into? And maybe they got into map consulting or into geology so there's it's very much finding the paths that those skills can enable. And I don't think we're in a position, certainly with linguists, where it'll be run out of work. It's going to be, there's another path, and you'll find more value than that path potentially as well. Many will stay in the industry, but we're going to have quite a large percentage of pivoting going on.
Right. And by the way, we see a good question popping up about linguistic creativity about that. That's one we're definitely going to work on. Okay. All right. So this is a favorite of mine. How can LLMs increase agility? So I'll leave that with you first, Dave, and I got to throw in my opinions on this.
So. I think if we look at this stuff big picture, you look at it from the perspective of reducing the friction between content creation, let's say, and global release. So when you look at any of the gig economy technologies, there was a kind of a reduction in friction and a use of some real estate that wasn't maybe being used, right? It was left idle. LLMs, I think a big part of it will be reducing that friction, and that'll convert to time. So in a real sense, coming in from 30,000 feet, instead of waiting for handoffs between teams, organizations can localize, review, and publish content almost immediately. You spoke about shifting left. kind of asynchronous localization concept. So this allows much faster experimentation. I mentioned two examples of that in clients earlier, and market response. I'll give you another example. There was someone from Flow Health, Indira Lorenzo, and she reported a 92% reduction, 92% in localization turnaround times for a particular thing they translate, which are push notifications that are pushed onto devices to let people know information. This is to do with healthcare, right? So they were able to get that 92% reduction in localization turnaround while maintaining and in some cases improving quality. So they went from 43 days typically to 3 days. And they still know that nothing beats humans when it comes to translation, but they only saw a differential in their quality checks of 6%. So their call was get 92% speed gain against a 6% difference in the quality level. And that was a no-brainer business decision for that content type and use case. In an industry where they're, typically a lot more rigorous about what goes out there.
So the bit I have to add about that is that agility isn't just about speed. I mean, speed is an important component, but one of the things you do with speed is you speed up the impact of feedback. So I'll give you for instance, like we have this really cool Figma. Like, you got to know, Lingoport is all about software, right? So it's all about globalizing software development. We're not like, we'll handle documents if they're sitting in Git, but we're really focused on software development, and when software, there's been this movement of software design or feature development moving into Figma design first, right? So we have this cool capability called Figma to Dev. And what that is you take the Figma sketches of the screen, what the user interface will look like, or some feature change or the like, and you automate the translation right there. But you also create the keys that the developers can then plug in. So the developers, instead of dealing with strings and plugging them in, they're literally just plugging in keys that are already delivered into their GitHub or GitLab or whatever they're using for their Git repository, right? They've already got them, right? So you've shifted left to pre-development, right? You're in the design phase. You can now send that with visual context to, say, somebody in Japan, like a distributor or a key customer or your sales team that's there, whatever, And I mentioned Japan quite literally because that's where, over the years, we see the most complaints about a translation come in, right? So you can get that feedback even before development starts. So that is true. One of the benefits of agility is you are correcting in smaller increments faster so that you get a better product. And so now you have a better worldwide product possible just through that very fast translation that can happen through an LLM and a validation, if you like. And maybe the translation isn't perfect, but you are getting input not just from a linguist who's separated from the translation, but an actual, user or seller or distributor who has a vested interest in this translation. So you're really taking a huge hunk of the loop that would happen later. And there's somebody who asked a question, for instance, on here, who said to me earlier this year, I want to translate on Monday and correct it on Wednesday, right? So literally, you're getting product out right away, and you're delivering translation. Really think of translation as a service, just like you would think of a transaction as a service. You wouldn't expect a shopping cart to take 3 days to give you your total, with shipping costs and taxes and the like. You're delivering that translation as a service, which is, to me, very exciting. It's been a translation vision of mine for like 20 years. So
I remember about 10
yeah.
years ago seeing a travel tech firm experiment with this in the multilingual content um, picture, and they basically they used to sell, they still sell tours. So that was
Right,
a core part of
right.
what they do. So the web page for the tour, let's say you're in the city, you're in Vienna, and you want to have a tour of the river, the Danube, great. Sign up for a tour. Now, when you went into their website, you would find that it was partially translated. So some of the core things for you to buy and purchase were working because we don't want that stuff to not sound familiar. But the actual tour description was still being translated. So they would ship the tour, and then, as you said, 2 days later, the whole thing would be fully translated. And it was just get it out there. So that, yes, it will be, perfect or very high quality at a point in the time real soon. And I think there's a great question in there from someone just on how do you maintain linguistic creativity and cultural nuance when AI systems increasingly standardized? Fabulous question. Yeah, and AI is excellent at consistency. It's that baseline. Creativity, cultural nuance have to come from context, intent, audience, all that stuff, right? So organizations who get this right will win using AI for scale and efficiency, and then ensuring they have, linguists to shape the voice, to challenge things, to make sure judgment calls give you that creativity afterwards. Now, how that melds for different content types is going to be the question, because certain content types won't work well that way. Like we have to remember, the German and Japanese audiences, in particular, and there are others, will look at content or a product and go, "This is not made in my country. I can tell it was translated." So, it's basically, and this gives us this kind of whole thing of the multi-personalization of workflows and what content has to do for a particular purpose. And it is going to be purpose intent. We'll talk about KBOs maybe in a little bit, and all of that. That is where things are moving to right now. Great question.
Right. Isn't it funny? And this is not for interaction, but it's funny. Like years ago, we used to, people used to say, like, everybody speaks English, because they go to Paris and they get by with English, But we're not having that conversation anymore, which is cool. All right. What does the in-house localization team of the future look like? Is there even a localization team?
Don't know how many friends I'll keep answering some of these questions, but it's yes. Let me get that out. But it will or may be smaller. And I say maybe because it's compared maybe to a legacy team that may have existed. So if you didn't have a legacy team, then and you start a team, you'll start with a smaller team. And that team will get more technical. So a future team is likely to consist of, let's say, a handful of engineer, technologists, AI specialists, program manager or managers, and governance leaders. So their job will be building, supervising systems rather than managing translations and translation programs and projects. So it's going to be rules, policies, routing, risk management, all that stuff. And one model that I heard proposed in recent conversation consisted of 2 to 5 engineers, a leader who, by the way, was very diplomatic. That was actually part of the spec as well. Technical project managers and language risk advisors, right? So remember what I was saying about up-leveling earlier. Language risk advisor becomes a thing. So there are various changes going on, as we know, on the client side. And I think this new lock team model will become a lot more apparent within the next 12 months. Typically, there are companies that lead the way on this in the innovator group, and then others see that and start to follow suit.
All right. Very good. And the funny thing is that I've also seen really small localization teams that are handling entire enterprises, and it tends to be that they actually lean on outside vendors more heavily. Is one of the ways that gets handled. But let's move on here. Do you think people will continue to care about quality? And I'm speaking of linguistic quality.
Um, I'll say yes again, meaning yes to what quality enables. So what I like to call this kind of KPI to KBO evolution. So does this language quality thing, just let me call it that for the moment, so this is from a CEO or a C-level perspective. Does that enable a key business objective for us as a company that we would care about? If the answer is yes, then we care about that thing. And that's, I'm just kind of being devil's advocate a little bit and wearing, corporate optics to say that's how it will be viewed. If it can enable key business objectives for that company, and it could be simple as just joining the dots, saying if you've bad quality in Germany, then you're going to lose revenues by 10% over 2 years or whatever it is. Yeah, you start caring about it because you've been able to link the two things together. So language quality has been redefined. Organizations increasingly care about the business outcomes, as I've just said, but also brand trust, user experience, rather than linguistic perfection. So it's leveled up, it's moved up a layer or two layers. The question's becoming, is this language good enough to achieve the business goal that we're trying to achieve here? And most of what LQA catches is it may not be worth fixing at scale, and the focus is moving from that kind of linguistic defect lens to customer impact, and that change is happening very quickly.
That's actually really encouraging. I know, like if we had this conversation a lot, maybe a year ago, a lot of the focus on LLM deployment was as a quality gate, which always struck me as sort of weak. It was just a natural evolution out of like lack of context, lack of prompt automation, that sort of thing. So it is how I see it. But there's a lot more we can do now.
Yeah, I think
Wise, it's worth just mentioning because if your quality is bad for certain types of application, people can die. I'm speaking of heavy mechanical equipment, medical equipment, that sort of thing. So I think I don't want to leave that context out.
No way. And there's a great comment in there.
Right.
Someone who's an internationalization consultant, and is talking that they think human reviews are needed, especially for legal docs, critical docs, like saving lives.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like if you just zoom out from all of this for a second and look at, I work in the M&A side of the business as well. And if you look at where are the tranches of resilience within the industry, then regulated industry within language is still very strong because they have all of the regulation and checks they still have to do. That doesn't change. They typically trust technologies a lot less and slower than other sectors, so that they're not going to deploy new technology until it's safe for their workflows, and it's that kind of language. So when it comes to saving lives, I worked a number of years ago, over 15, with a very large pharma company in the Midwest, and we had a conversation over lunch with many people from their regulatory teams about a choice of words on a label. And that choice of words was may or could. So it was in the context of this may cause some side effect, or this could cause some side effect. And in Spanish, the translation of may or could can be kind of merged together a bit. So it was a whole debate about this. And you can be sure that they double check, triple check to ensure that usage of the term was correct, because their legal teams had signed off their source content, and they didn't want to go through that process again. So that stuff is still going to happen the way it has. They are risk adverse in those industries and will not take risk to try something new, and find out that later they've got some legal actions to deal with just because of it.
Good, good. All right, we're coming to our last question, and then we're going to just head on into the audience questions. So this is the crystal ball question. How would you describe evolution of localization in the near future?
That's a tough one. There's no easy questions here, Adam. What's going on? I think it's evolving from more of a production function into, governance growth function that, many people are seeing it this way. So AI handles more of the execution, localization teams focus on things like risk, I've mentioned architecture, compliance, what success looks like in markets, and business outcomes, what they look like and what do we want them to be. So that's where those teams start to focus on. So the winners, if you want to call it that, will be organizations that can orchestrate all of this well. So the human part of it, make sure that the touch points are where they need to be. The AI part of it, business objectives, and ensure that if they're on the vendor side, that the pivot is ahead of what their customers will be looking for, so that you have pivoted your business model and you've done that fast. 5 years ago, localization teams were primarily managing translation workflows, right, with some exceptions. Today, they're increasingly managing AI systems, governance frameworks, multilingual growth programs. And that can happen in a kind of an individualistic sense where, it's mandated from the top down in that company. And then when they go to a conference like LocWorld, they share that with other people, and then suddenly their peers are going, oh, wow, maybe we should be doing that as well. So it's happening in different ways, how the information flow and standardization, which I put in air quotes because in our industry, we know the story there. But that shift was visible certainly at that last event I was at. And let me leave you with one last, maybe slightly hopeful point on this. One person mentioned that, 80% of viable content bypasses localization platforms completely. So viable meaning viable customer content that could go through. So the future localization challenge is therefore something like not controlling every translation, but governing multilingual content wherever it's created. Okay, very good. It's time to go to the questions. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, as we say in Ireland. Yeah. All right. We're going into the Q&A. We already have a lot of questions, which is great. We will try to get them quickly, all of them, although some of them warrant more. First one, I'm not going to announce the questioner's name just because sometimes people get spooked about that. So I think there's a way to ask a question anonymously also. But anyway, if you don't like your name being public. So anyway, Conway's Law states organizations which design systems are constrained to, first of all, I didn't even know there was a Conway's Law, so that's cool. I'll learn something. Organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations, which is why there are so many standalone vibe-lutions that don't directly benefit any one particular client, but there are no real standards, APIs, etc., created unmaintainable lock-ins. What are your thoughts on this? I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think if I kind of go back 30 years, and I really like the question, I think I know who asked it as well. Yeah. He's one of your compatriots. Yeah. I worked with the gent many years ago, absolute gentleman. And if you think about the industry, right, where did translation segments come from? Right? Where did that structure come from in the first place? And this little sidetrack here, I had a conversation with somebody who was directly involved at the time in developing the Trados system. And that whole structure was originally a sales tool. They used it as a sales tool for their services. That was it. This was not meant to stick, right? It was all a mistake. And I think that, it kind of speaks to what the questioner is asking in that, constraints within the structure of organizations that built them? Absolutely. Like we've been using segmentation and translation memory since then because somebody at a company, Travis, had developed this and come up with this whole concept originally as a sales tool and then as a production way to store things that were being translated. So absolutely. Like as an industry, there were some initiatives to try and share information between translation memory databases, which kind of fell asunder because organizations wanted to hold on to the proprietary rights and show differentiation through it. So I think what's different now is that much of the innovation that's been driven is coming from client side down. So it's in their interest to meet KBOs. And I think that is going to dictate what the supply chain does so that it's less going to be supply chain dictating and more from the top down. And I think you kind of saw that a little bit with the rise of translation management systems 20 years ago. That's where end client companies wanted the IP of their assets, translation assets, to be in-house. Even though it was in the cloud, they had ownership and access to it directly. So yeah, no, great question.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to that is first of all, there definitely are APIs to various LLMs and the like. The whole presentation, we didn't touch on security, which is probably an oversight on my part. But one of the reasons why we, also I think particularly moving forward, besides the ability to vibe code things up quickly, is that security is a real concern. And when you build products that work for more than a standalone vibe solution, you have to start thinking about these things. And these things definitely slow down product development, but man, I could really talk about some frustrations there, but I won't. All right, let's move on. How do you maintain linguistic, whoops, hold on, skip.
I think we may have answered that one.
Yeah, linguistic creativity and cultural nuance when AI, okay. All right, I'm gonna move on then. I would point out that with AI-based services, localization is just one piece because the underlying product is linguistic. It doesn't matter how well your UI is translated if the AI service is dysfunctional in that language. Okay, I'm not sure what the question is there.
It's not a question.
Yeah, I think it's
just the point of view that someone shared.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, good point of view. Thanks,
all right, good. What does a successful localization leader look like in 2030? Ooh, that's a hard one. 2030 is around the freaking corner. Wow.
Yeah.
And which skills should professionals start building now to prepare for the future?
Yeah, it's a big shift, and it is that close, folks. Yeah. So it's from language operations that maybe is happening now to this kind of business strategy, multilingual business strategy, and skills. Well, the one we all need to have if we're not working on it, AI fluency, whatever that looks like, literacy with data constructs, workflow orchestration. One of my favorite books, Change Management, Who Moved My Cheese. You got to go back to those things. And a large degree of empathy as you're doing that so that you can actually be this thing I sometimes coach on, learning agility and having the ability to learn and learn fast and learn new things. That learning agility is going to be key. But real focus and alignment to the KBO as your kind of North Star. Whereas, here to now, depending on the type of operation, whether it's vendor side or client side, people were just basically listening to what their manager was asking them to do. But now it's going to be KBO focused.
Really good answer. At a lower level, I would also just add, learn Git. I mean, you think about Git, it has a total chain of what's happened, right? And, think of workflow tools and assignments either via Git or via Jira as sort of new arbiters of who does what or what does what. So it's probably a little different way of thinking of versus the interaction with the outside vendor. There's some of that. I think everybody should learn a little bit about software development and
Yeah,
the
it's
principles within there.
absolutely like
You don't have to become a developer, but just learn a little bit.
no, it's lesser people doing repetitive production work, but more people who can, have a mix of language, technology, AI, process, development understanding, business understanding. That's it's that multifaceted skills, be able to speak in public, all of these things. And now we're able to actually the barrier to entry to those is so much lower that you can do that. So if you're a new entrant or if you're someone who is the old dog like me who has to learn new tricks, then you have the facility to do it. But learn agility. You work on that first, the rest of it becomes easier.
Very good. This next question was probably answered by one of our attendees better than I could. It's really good. But I'm going to repeat it and I'm going to read it out loud here. Could I ask a follow-up question? Yes, of course. What opportunities does a small, more technical team leave for newcomers in the industry? I recently graduated from MIIS with a localization degree. And what I notice is that all the job openings are for those who are highly experienced already. What would organizations' expectation be for younger professionals? This question is going on all over the place. It's not just in localization.
Yep.
So Stephen writes, new entrants into the field have access to unprecedented technologies and can build out proof of concepts in process and tooling to explore, evolve ideas. So share them via, get a public GitHub account or whatever you're doing to demonstrate your capabilities. I'd certainly be encouraging this approach over standard interview rhetoric.
Yeah,
I'd
100%.
also add take an internship, if you can get one.
Yeah, get experience, but I completely agree with Steve. I think great question as well, by the way.
Right.
So thanks to the person who asked that. And look, this is going to be a lot more about looking at the various tools. Like someone asked me recently, what are technical people going to do now that there's technology? They'll be the ones who decide which ones plug together. We're going to have things plugging into each other. You're not going to have one technology. We didn't talk about TMSs this time, maybe at a future conversation, but people are going to want to plug in the best of breed stuff. It's like having the original apps on the iPhone. So as someone who's coming out of university, it's looking at, hey, I see an opportunity here. Great, have a go at it. Create the concept, as Steve says. You've got tools to do that. Knowing Steve, by the way, he was an engineer. I was an engineer. You don't have to be an engineer now to create these things. You can just come up with a concept, get AI to help you develop the concept, and then ask AI, how do I get this built? So it's that kind of thing. Yes, scary, but imposter syndrome not needed. Park it at the door. I'll give you a kind of a grain of hope as well. So at LocWorld, I run another event called Pick Sneaks, and Pick Sneaks is for university students who have a conceptual idea, and we give them stage time. Many of them never spoke in front of an audience before, so when I offer them a kind of a preview slot in front of 300 people, they were kind of going, ah. So, but when they took it on, they had this idea, and they put it out there on stage. What happened next was really interesting. People came up to them and said, I love your idea. Here's my contact, link in me. I'd love to see how this progresses. Ask me anything you want. So that kind of networking ability, if you have some ideas, network first. Steve mentioned something about interview rhetoric. I coach on this and I say, Try not to do, you will have to do interviews, right? At some point, but connect with people. If you find a company that you're interested in, find out about them. Connect with someone, say, hey, I'm love to find out more about your company. Most people aren't going to say, leave me alone. They might say, come back to me when I'm less busy, or I'll come back to you. But you can reach out and find out about what it is like working at a company, what kind of opportunities by connecting to relevant people. And hopefully you're not going to connect to everybody, but relevant is the word there.
All right, we are almost out of time, although I'm okay with going over if you are, Dave. There's a quick question which was answered in the Q&A interface. How will quality be measured when human review is reduced? Again, the answer that one of our participants already did here is my belief that the agentic cross-examination as an evolution of LLM as a judge will become normalized. We're already seeing this in general agentic workflows that self-check themselves at each step. Yes, this is very true. I think what has to be, some of the danger which can be mitigated is that when when you don't have like sort of a funnel of which to take AI use or LLM use in with some constraints, you might really get wildly different results. The sort of formatting or formatting is not the right word. Really, some standardized interface with prompting, context, and then judgment, review. The judgment being after the LLM translate, you have a separate LLM translate review, and then you have that diff, and you have that scoring of that diff, and you decide you want a human to do it. And how do they, like I attended a presentation, it was a freaking awesome presentation, but they were having a linguistic review go through Git, which I know would be a no-go at like all of my customers, right? They're not going to give a linguist access to their Git repositories for software. For document, maybe they would, but for software, no freaking way. Some parameter will get broken and the app will be broken. But anyway, so it's the mechanism that goes around that I see a lot of change. Well, certainly I'm investing quite a bit in that software architecture for that and software development for that. But anyway, I've said too much already. Let's move on. I do think that Stephen did a good job answering that question. It's basically get used to it. It's a very natural use.
Yeah, right. and look, just real quick on that one. As disruptive technologies come in, the hype cycle is still going on, certainly in localization. Right. We're starting to see that conversion. But then people focus on niche solutions. So you had technologies such as ModelFront for doing automated assessment of FT output. So there are embedded solutions which really will be able to evolve into this world as well quite well. I saw an innovation last year in October in Monterey at LocWorld where it was someone who has technology, Klaus Fleischmann and Kaleidoscope, and that's been around for a while. Klaus would admit it as well. He had the Pink Floyd t-shirt on stage as well. And he basically have seen a resurgence in the requirement for that exact same technology in a new use case. And I think that's what we're going to see. So some innovations are going to be reuses, take the wheel and plug it into something else. And you just have to spot what the real problem set is. So I expect with quality, we're going to see a bit of that as well, although a lot more automation.
All right, next question, we really are running out of time. Kate, can you just tell me if there are a lot of questions on LinkedIn Live?
No, there is nothing, so we just left these two. from
Oh,
the
okay, good, good,
Anonymous
good.
and from
All right,
Simon
then I'm going to
project.
take the
Yeah.
time to answer them, even though we're at
Okay.
time right now. Okay. It seems like the industry is moving from 2 layers, TMS plus LSP, towards 3 layers, TMS plus linguistic intelligence layer and LSP, where the linguistic intelligence layer is the combination of the MT plus AI engine aggregation plus the AI post-edit and other functions that try to get the translation as close to human gold standard as possible. How should localization clients think about these layers? Should each layer be sourced from a different vendor, or should it be all integrated into a single vendor? Wow.
Great question.
Yeah.
I have a quick answer in that. BPO was a big thing 25 years ago. Everyone was trying to sell it as an LSP. Business process outsourcing. And we'll take the whole enchilada, the ingredients, we'll cook it on the grill for you. Don't worry, we've got it.
Right. Right.
But now, so do you have an integrated solution for all of those 3 layers? And really well elaborated question. But then you've got lock-in, right? So you're creating stickiness on the vendor side, which for them is great. Is it great for you? Does that give you the ability to plug stuff in, as we were talking about earlier, which you are going to need, because the flux of change isn't going to stop. We're going to have a new thing that everyone's raving about in 18 months. So how do you, have you got the garage and the chassis of the car and the mechanics? How are you going to take the engine out, put a new one in? And I think that's the key to keep in mind when you're thinking about this. So do you have a TMS layer over here? Thank you very much. You have a linguistic intelligence layer there, LSP layer there, and then I can do plug in and plug out if I so need. And and I'm not trying to be crass. I just think you have to look at this from the business perspective of people who are spending money on it.
I will say, like everybody's technology, including mine, is at risk if you don't move with times. MT is a concept. I mean, that's certainly at risk. And translation memory, that's just a file, that's just a prompt, essentially. Not necessarily a thing to hold on to with the TMS. The other thing is, like I mentioned, Jira will assign people things. Git will show you the history of what's been updated and who did what. So, but what the TMS maybe does for people still is it provides a single place for the localization department to go to get their answers right. They may not have Git access. They may not have whatever. So I think the TMS becomes sort of like a platform that you build other things connected to, certainly, or in some cases you don't rely on it so much anymore. I think that the different organizations will do different things, but I do encourage people to think about scalability. If you've got a small organization and maybe one product, your solution may be different than something where you're managing localizations. That there's one person who's been asking questions on here who in conversation, he's got 2,000 products. We have some customers of ours that literally have thousands of repositories that they're managing, and so they need some sort of way to scale that reliably, right?
Yeah.
So
Centralization, decentralization
horses for
concept.
horses, courses,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah,
And you're right.
yeah,
It is that centralization, decentralization argument.
right.
One works for some people. Some people need a crutch of a system.
Mm-hmm.
Others don't want to do that. There are a group of companies that are moving away from the kind of TMS concept and maybe having
Mm-hmm.
it in there for specific bespoke needs, but it's
Mm-hmm.
part of a much bigger umbrella
Mm-hmm.
technology stack.
Right,
It's not the core part anymore. And other companies, it's the core part still.
right. Okay, declining value equals. Hi, Simon. All right.
Translation.
Yeah. Sorry. No, it's something came across my screen here and I got distracted. Declining value, translation cost per word, model selection, increasing value, equal outcome optimization, language intelligence orchestration. Thoughts on whether we are challenging ourselves at the right levels and changing fast enough as an industry.
Yeah, I think we've alluded to some of this. Thanks, Simon. Great to see the question. Yeah, the biggest opportunity is moving up the value chain, as we've discussed a bit. Look at, KBOs, outcome optimization, language intelligence, orchestration, all that stuff. So it's how do we achieve those outcomes, and are we making progress? As an industry, we are, but much of the conversation is still focused on making translation cheaper and faster, and rather than focused on multilingual growth, AI governance, customer experience improvement, revenue enablement. So pace of change is moving fast. Is it fast enough? Depends on how quickly organizations stop optimizing legacy models and start building the next one. It's like, real quick story, 1920s in the UK, factory owner, electricity arrived and he was saying, oh, that's a nice little toy. Let's plug it into a lighting system and get new. So it worked for lights. So it was only used for lighting for many years until new factories were created that could actually use electricity to power their assembly line. So the systems that they actually used to produce goods could not use electricity. So it was a gimmick. But obviously it was very powerful when they had systems that could use electricity to produce goods.
Right. Right. I'll also just say, like, go back to the poll we did early or in here. 50% of you said you're using AI all the time, LLMs all the time. I would bet that of that 50% that are using it all the time, they're not yet quite, they may be using it all the time, but it's not like it's rote. It's still new. It's still, they're still tweaking how they're using it. They're still, sort of in the inventive stage or ad hoc stage or whatever that may be. We'll really see a lot when things, just become normal. Just like there'll be systems that just make this normal, right? And we're not quite there yet as an industry, and that's okay. One of the things I've always seen as a product development guy is that you come up with a new feature and people say, oh, that's really cool. And even those people that say it's really cool, it takes a while to implement things over an enterprise. It just does, to get people to change, to get people. I mean, half the things we talk about, people will forget 10 minutes from now. I mean, that's just the nature of human cognition, right? So adapting behavior just takes time. So that's all. All right, we're done, I think. Thanks for all you that stayed with us, quite a few of you. So I really appreciate that. You'll be receiving a newsletter in not much time. Kate, who's in, yeah, there's Kate.
Yes, and the recording, so you don't forget everything we discussed here in 10
right.
minutes. You will have time to. And I just want to say thank you for everyone who asked questions. It was so well, I don't know, it was fantastic today. Really incredible questions, really thought through and everything. And to those people who actually helped us to reply. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that was just a great session. Lots of interaction. Let's do that again next month. We're just putting the speakers together for next month, and you'll get information about that. You'll get the recording. Dave, thanks very much for all the thought you put into this.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate
Thanks.
it. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.